Artificial intelligence is being sold as either the next industrial revolution or the end of humanity. But how much of that is hype? Today, we're separating reality from marketing machine and looking at what AI can actually do, what it can't do, and where there may be some real risks. Hey, welcome back to Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Great to have you with me for another awesome show. And today I'm going to bring in a guest. We're going to be talking about AI. And, it seems like that's every podcast I listen to somehow divulges into an AI discussion. But this one, that'll be mostly the entire discussion. So hang on for that in just a minute. But before I do that, I want to remind you guys about Fox and Sons Coffee. Hopefully by now, I've been promoting Stephen Fox and Fox and Sons for several months now. So hopefully you've taken advantage of the promo code that I've given you and got yourself some coffee. If you have, let me know what you think. You can shoot me an email. You can find me on Twitter, X, or Instagram at John Odermatt, and let me know what you think of Stephen Fox's coffee. If you haven't got any yet, you can go to foxandsons.com. That is FOXNSONS.com and get 15% off an order of $40 or more by using promo code JOHN, that's JOHN, at checkout. All right, let's bring in my guest for today. And my guest is Marty Milligan. Marty has been a long time listener of Lions of Liberty. That's how I met him. We've had lunch in person together at least one time and many conversations over the years. But Marty is the founder of Digital On-Ramp WSI, where he helps small and mid-sized businesses solve real problems through software development, marketing, technology, and practical applications of AI. He spent 20 years at EDS, major technology migrations across multiple generations of computing systems. He later worked nearly a decade helping prepare the NOAA satellite archive for the massive data expansion for next generation weather satellites. And today, he's focusing on helping organizations cut through the hype around AI and implement it in ways that actually create value. Marty, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Thanks for letting me come on and rant. I know I begged you for this for a while. So
That's what podcasting is all about. It's all about ranting. So I look forward to the rants. And when we talked offline a few days ago, we some nice rants there too. I kind of wish we recorded that, but I guess we'll probably try to reproduce some of that today. Before we get to the rants, though, for the people in my audience who don't know who you are and don't know a lot about you, introduce yourself. Let the people know who you are.
I was a long time technical developer, software product manager, project manager. Been in the tech space for about 40 years. A while back, I had a contract with NOAA where they were basically launching all of these giant weather data satellites that are just have a tremendous amount of data coming down. It was going to swamp out the archive. And I got asked to join the team and that did the re-engineering of the archive to take all that data. And, I complained about government contracts for decades. And I said, I really want to have if I'm going to complain, I need to be honest about it and have some firsthand experience. So I joined and did that project. And I learned an awful lot about the way things get done. I really haven't changed my mind a whole lot, but I think it was a good experience to kind of, it was a very difficult project. And when I got done with it, I definitely didn't want to do any more government contracting. And I was pretty burned out on the large companies. So I started my own company. And then during COVID, a lot of us at WSI had experience with AI and saw all of the new developments, and we just started playing with it and using it in our own business, and eventually it became a huge part of our business. We have AI education, AI governance, and we develop AI projects with clients. So, we really kind of, we were looking for something to keep occupied during COVID, and it just became, this is a new tool, and it became pretty much started taking over our business and became more important than traditional software development or some of the marketing technology we would normally deploy.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this, but I posted on my Facebook last night from 1 to 10. How worried are you about the negative consequences of AI? With one being not worried at all, and 10 being, terrified. And I would say that the feedback I got for the most part is that people aren't that worried. Of course, I think there's definitely some who are very worried. I'm just curious to kind of start off, like, how would you respond to that question?
Uh, I'm more worried about the way people are reacting to AI than AI itself. Um, if you've been in the tech space for a while, you kind of see like the fits and starts of technology. So this big boost we've had in the last 5 years has seems like it came out of nowhere, and it's really taking over the industry,
Hmm.
and that tends to instill a lot of fear in people. But if you've been around the industry for a while, you know that we've had these spurts of new productivity and new capabilities over the years, and they haven't really been that disruptive. And I think a lot of the fear and the hype around AI right now is using AI as a scapegoat for some other problems that are happening in both tech, business, the economy, and society. So, I definitely think there are downsides and some problems with AI that have to be addressed. And I think the any attempt to whitewash those and sweep them under the rug is not going to be productive. But I also think that they're being quite overblown. For example, the job loss with Jack Dorsey's company. Right now we're going to attribute that to, as they say, it's an AI
Hmm.
driven, job replacement. But Jack has a reputation for building organizations that are overly large, and and Parkinson's law takes over. Work expands to fill everybody that's available, and then you just have to cut and prune back. And I think we're going to say, okay, sure, Jack, it was AI that drove that downsizing, but not all of these downsizings are really going to be AI related. And if a couple different places have done analysis on job loss this year, and it looks like about zero point 0.1 to 1% on the low end and up to 4% on the high end have been due to AI. So I think we can really overblow the problems are going to be caused, and but we at the same time we can be very realistic about addressing the problems.
Hmm. Well, I think, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I think we've been in a recession for the last few years. It hasn't been recognized, but we're not seeing the economic growth that I think maybe some people expected to come when we had the administration change. But when it comes to, like, what you're talking about with corporate job loss, I worked in large corporations, mid-sized corporations for about 16 years. And as you were kind of talking about there's a lot of people who don't do anything. And sure, AI does, make for, I think, optimization in some areas a little bit easier in some of those paper pushing jobs. But at the same time, layoffs have always happened in down cycles. I mean, companies all even not during down cycles, large companies regularly every couple years reorganize, cut back, restructure, and I think that's just kind of the way they do business. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, there's a. Have you ever heard of Parkinson's law?
I think
Uh,
so.
there was
What
a,
is that exactly? Maybe I
yeah,
don't
there's
remember it.
H. Northcutt Parkinson was a military historian, and he
Mhm.
wrote a book in the 1970s called Parkinson's Law. And he kind of detailed how administrative organizations grow and the workload grows to match the organization, even as their responsibilities shrink. And he
Mm.
used the British Admiralty as kind of his example for that. And big companies have to stay profitable. They have to answer to shareholders. And even, it becomes very difficult to manage organizations that get too big. So companies, of all sizes tend to downsize on a regular basis just to stay, co- you know, just to stay able to function.
Mhm.
They need to stay profitable. They need to be able to manage their people. So, that is the thing they have to do. And those regular downsizings that we see in corporate America are just an acknowledgement of Parkinson's law. And you can almost every single one of them has been blamed on something. It was the dot-com bust. It was the housing boom. It was or the housing bust. It was 9/11. Every one of them has you need we're human beings. We live on story. We have to have a narrative to understand things.
Mhm.
If one doesn't exist, we'll give it to it. So I think today a lot of the downsizing that's been happening is due to uh, the lack of growth. I mean, I've got this theory that the United States economy needs greater than 3% long-term growth in order to function properly. And since the turn of the century, that just hasn't been something that's been achieved. And if you look at the way we calculate inflation, chances are it's been higher than we've been acknowledging. And given those things, there's a good chance we've had a lot more down quarters than we've acknowledged over the last 20 years.
Mhm. So you referenced some of these bubbles, the dot-com bubble, the housing crash in 2008, 2009. A lot of people are saying right now that AI is a bubble and it's going to burst. Do you think that we're in a bubble right now? Do you think we're entering an AI bubble? Do you subscribe to the AI bubble theory?
Um, I think you have to look at it from the perspective of the investors, the employees, and the customers. And I think from an investment standpoint, we very well could be in a bubble based on how much investment we've been putting in. And it's really
Mhm.
two tiered. And so I'd like to compare it to the dot com bubble because the dot com bubble, there were a lot of small companies that were getting big investor dollars coming in through different
Big
funding.
valuations. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what happened was you had these companies that had no revenue and didn't have any way of coming up with revenue that were growing to these crazy evaluations. They were using, you know, private money to grow, and their marketing strategy was to light money on fire until they had enough users to figure out how to monetize them and then suddenly make money. And you know, that was rampant during the dot com era. If you look at what's happening today, a lot of the small companies that are building tools with AI don't have nearly the same access to capital. And it's really the hyperscalers that have the access to capital. And yes, we could see some of these hyperscalers being overvalued. We could see chip makers being overvalued, some of the companies building data centers and other equipment that they use being overvalued.
Mhm.
But to have the entire AI market be overvalued is probably not in the same we're not in the same waters that we were in during the dot-com era. I've talked to several different investment houses about how they see the uh, the AI bubble, and almost all of them don't see the risk the same way they saw the dot-com risk. They
Mhm.
think that it's probably somebody is going to have problems because there's no way you can invent an entirely new industry and have everybody make perfectly good choices. Somebody's going to make bad choices and somebody's going to fail. And somebody's going to come up with an out of the blue idea that takes something that a lot of investment has been made in and make it obsolete overnight. NVIDIA's had several scares in that area where it looked like, you could train a model for much less than what it was costing to do using a bunch of NVIDIA chips. That didn't really prove out to be the case. That turned
Mm.
out that you still needed those types of chips. So I don't think we're going to see a wholesale deleveraging of all of the entire AI space. We're going to see valuations of certain companies come back down to earth. That's not, but that's not really a bubble. That's just a normal consequence of doing business. Um, I think that we need to acknowledge that the U.S. stock market's valuations are in an uncharted territory. Uh, you know, we pumped so much money into equities and assets that it's really hard to tell where valuations should be at this time.
Mhm.
Um, you know, we've got what, like, I don't know how long 401ks have existed. But every week the dumb money is going into the S&P 500, win, lose or draw. And that does an awful lot to pump up valuations. So it's really hard to tell in our current environment, just where valuation should be. And so, I think it's definitely, you have to be prudent as an investor. Now, as a customer, I think there's a new set of rules that we have to be aware of, and that we don't want to do as much vendor lock-in as we allowed in the past. Back in the 70s and 80s, IBM lock-in was very common. Into the 90s, Microsoft lock-in was very common. In the decade, when Google emerged, Google has still got a lot of vendor lock-in. And we're starting to see these AI companies need to the need for a little bit of vendor diversification is something that businesses really need to be taking into account and preparing for. And as you know, individual users and skilling ourselves and trying to get some kind of AI competency, we probably should
Mhm.
be using a lot of different models and a lot of different products and seeing how they work. So that in case one of them has some problems and it's an air pocket, we don't find our skills obsolete.
I think that's a really good point. And I kinda just in my own personal use of AI, I'm checking myself on that because I think I use ChatGPT too much, so I'm trying to incorporate, other tools like Claude, and I think, when you look at AIs, and I'm not an expert, but obviously some are more well trained in certain areas, right? Like, for example, if I'm going to, um I don't know. Like if I'm gonna try to get some help writing an email or something, and dumping ideas in to get a framework, I'm probably going to go to ChatGPT and not go to Grok. That's just my experience, and maybe in a couple weeks or months that'll change. Which one's better at that? But I think there's a lot to that for people who are using it to always be experimenting with the different AI models in order to find the best use.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, the DoD, putting a vendor risk on Claude could be a major upset. Claude, everything whenever you use Claude, you're actually using AWS. And so if the vendor risk is that Amazon can't do business with Anthropic, well, then all of a
Mhm.
sudden we're not going to be able to use Claude. And as somebody who is absolutely in love with Claude's software development capabilities, that's quite scary. So I've been I have been very force very disciplined in being able to use multiple models to do software development. Large part of what got me started on this was being able to take unstructured data and use AI to build databases for my clients and some startups. And right away, when we began that, we were self checking against different AIs to make that happen. So I really try to encourage people that even if you find an AI that you just absolutely love,
Mhm.
like whenever I need to learn something new, I love going to Grok, um, because there's just something about the way they program its personality to go out and suggest books and
Mm.
different articles, and so and Grok will when you're on the right track, it'll blow smoke up your ass. But
They
when
they
you
they they all will.
well,
Every AI will lie to you. Like,
one of the nice things about Grok is when you go way off the reservation, it will just tell you you're off the reservation, dummy. This is how you should be looking, and that I love that when I'm trying to
Mhm.
learn something is that the AI will call me out and tell me, hey, you're full of it. You need to go. You need to look this way, or you need to think about that, or you're overemphasizing this. And Grok is really good at that,
Mm.
especially if when you start the conversation, you tell it, Grok, be brutally honest with me, and you know OpenAI, kind of has this, built into it that it's going to be nice to you and it's going to be friendly and very professional. Where if you tell Grok, don't let me waste time on bad ideas, Grok is not going to let you waste time.
Mhm.
It'll call you out. So, but using the different AI models for different things and experimenting, and one of the things we have is a free book on how to do prompts, and it really kind of gives you some ideas that you can tell, hey Grok, or whichever AI you're doing, you're in the role of drill instructor, or you're in the role of my
Mhm.
favorite teacher, or the most difficult disciplinarian. That's what you're playing, and teach me how to do this. And surprisingly, when you give the AI its purpose and more instructions like that, it will actually be very effective. And it's a lot of fun to try it out on different AIs. And I think that's a necessary skill people are going to have to use.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one thing that I need to do more of is I use AI to underwrite properties in real estate, and I need to start doing that where I'm cross checking across multiple ones because I'm sure there's going to be wide variances. But
Mm.
I, I
Yeah.
do I do want to get to, because I know you're passionate about it. I don't want to run out of time on this. I want to talk about data centers because when it comes to data centers, we were talking about this offline the other day. Um, there's a lot of people who have some you know unreal fears about data centers that I don't even know where they come from. I don't know who is really giving people these fears to worry about a data center popping up 20 minutes down the road from them, ruining their water supply and radiating them with I don't know what. But from the data center perspective, coming from energy, I'm super fascinated with how are all these data centers going to be powered. And when you look at like where we are in Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, this area, I think it's just so natural that we have all this gas in the ground. You power them with natural gas. And I remember when I was working in nuclear, they were talking about, well, for these data centers, we'll just get these old coal fired power plants and we'll retrofit them with nuclear. It's like, why would you do that when you have natural gas right there? So I'm just curious to kind of open up the conversation around data centers. Do people have anything to fear with data centers?
Well, I mean, I think there are a couple things that people have reasonable fears about, but they're very limited. Um, you know, we have been in a grid build out for 2 decades that hasn't actually added capacity to the grid. We've spent tremendous amount of money over the last 2 to 3 decades adding renewables or so-called renewables to the grid, and they're really intermittent forms of energy. So we don't really we haven't done a lot to the actual capability to produce baseload power,
Hmm.
and this has caused electricity prices to go up everywhere this has been tried. Now, I know that a lot of people look to China and say, well, China has a ton of solar, they have a ton of wind. Why are they able to produce all of this power when they have all of these big renewable installations? And it's really the way they build their grid is different than the way we've been trying to build our grid. China understands that nuclear, coal, gas, and oil are baseload technologies,
Hmm.
and wind and solar are additional technologies that allow you to cut back on that base load. So basically, they're fuel saving devices, kind of like a hybrid car.
That makes sense.
Um, so the yeah, I know you were a nuclear guy. I was, when I was in college, I really wanted to go into nuclear power, and my professor pulled me aside and told me, you can't do this. You'll never have a career. In fact, I was trying to get into the Navy to teach nuclear physics, but the Cold War ended, and so they just decided that people with flat feet were no longer being accepted to teach nuclear physics. Um, but so in the United States, we've done a lot of build out trying to add wind and solar to our baseline or our baseline base load power, and that's just never going to work. So people are starting to see their electric bills go up as load is starting to be added. We're getting more demand. So we've put a lot of investment into our or into our power grid. We haven't really increased our capabilities, and now we're starting to see new load. Well, it didn't matter if it was going to be data centers, concrete plants, whatever. Anything we add to the grid is going to cause this problem. And so, the United States has been deindustrializing since the end of World War II. Um, and we this idea that we're going to suddenly start bringing things back to the United States, if we can't add power to the grid and we can't add in some industrialization, is just going to be tough. And so these data centers, from the big fear is power and power bills going up. And yeah, we do have to worry about that. But when the data center gets put onto the grid, part of putting the data center onto the grid should include grid improvements. When in the '70s, my dad was in a mason, and one of the companies he worked for owned a brick company. Whenever they would put a new concrete plant on into a place, they had to improve the roads, they had to improve the water systems, and they had to improve electricity.
That's the same with gas wells too. When you put in a gas or an oil well, you always have to maintain the infrastructure.
So I think what we're dealing with now is, I think that there's a battle going on where the people who want to put in data centers don't want to be on the hook for all of the infrastructure upgrades, especially since the grid is in such bad shape. And so they are trying to offload a little bit of that. But if you look at most of these proposals, they do have a lot of improvements to the infrastructure where they're going to be placing these things. And I think that the citizens should really focus on the improvements to their infrastructure, as opposed to instead of opposing the data center. I mean, the data centers require a huge amount of construction jobs to build out.
Mhm.
They don't really put in a huge demand as far as new jobs, but the jobs in the data center are very highly skilled. So you bring in, 100 to 200 really high skilled jobs that are going to stay there and contribute to your economy. And you're going to have a giant increase in your property taxes. Here in West Virginia, we've had a county that, I mean, literally the economy was built around draw checks, meth, and ATV tours in that order. And they were opposing a new data center that was going to get built on an abandoned golf course. The reason the golf course was abandoned was because nobody in their right mind would put in any type of business that would draw golfers into the county.
Yeah.
So the idea that, the ATVs are less, damaging to the environment than the data center. And, one of the things I think that they've missed the opportunity at is the mines that were in the area really put a hurt on their water system.
Mhm.
And the data center coming in was an opportunity to find somebody who would finally pay to fix their water system. But instead of trying to negotiate improvements for putting in the data center, they tried to oppose it instead. To me, that's just crazy. We really should be trying to get a win-win-win out of these data centers going into these places. If the hyperscalers want to put in a data center, They should pay for grid improvements, road improvements, water improvements, and they should be happy to do it because these data centers are, there are so many applications for this that these data centers should really be a license to print money, and these communities should improve from them. And if we can't even put a data center in, which has very low pollution, very low load, very low weight on a community, how are we going to do things like bring industry back to the country?
Mhm.
And we're in a world where we have this idea we want tons of immigrants to come into our country. We want to have ridiculously high education prices, but we're not going to do anything to build anything that's going to create jobs. I, you know, that math just doesn't work. At some
Yeah.
point we have to build things and put people to work.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it building the data centers is, do we even have the craft labor, the welders, the plumbers, the tradesmen to actually build the data centers? Like, as you talked about, those initial jobs that you need to build them, I don't even know if we have that in this country anymore at this point in time.
It's really funny. Like that was one of the problems with nuclear power in the '70s. The way they wrote a lot of those contracts um, didn't put a lot of responsibility on the companies doing the welding, and you would see the welding for a nuclear power plant have to be done 5 times because they would do a half-assed
Mhm.
job just because they knew they would get paid to do it again, and there was no it was time and material type contracts not
I
delivered.
I've seen that in oil and gas too, for sure.
Um, and the interesting thing is that my one of my father's good friends traveled the world in the '80s building um, steel um, fire boxes. Basically, he was a fire brick layer, and he traveled the world. He spent more time in China than he did in the United States for a few years, just because there was that much demand to build those kind of factories overseas. I think that I think it's a valid concern that we might not have the skills to do that. But every time I worry about our young people, if I just spend a little bit of time with them, I am convinced if we unleashed our young people, we have the most capable, the most hardworking, the most interested young people if we just give them the chance.
Mhm.
I've never worked on a project, in volunteer or in business with young people where I haven't been completely impressed with the people we have in this country. And I think that I think we do want to have a lot of immigration. I think we do want to encourage our people to do a lot, but in order to do that, we have to have opportunity. And I think that the more restrictions we put on things, the more difficult it is to provide a future for our young people and to provide a future for people who want to immigrate.
Mhm. All right, so let's get into the real meaty topic that maybe people thought we were gonna focus on when they see this headline. So, a lot of people that have fear of AI, they're worried about Skynet, they're worried about, Terminator taking over. You've even seen Elon talk about things like this, like, well, it's possible, and he puts probabilities on it that, that AI, you know, what's the word it is, the singularity, that occurs. So what are your thoughts around that side of AI? Is there a real concern with AI taking over and turning humans into their slaves?
Yeah, have you ever heard the white marble and the black marble in the bag? And
No.
that each invention humanity pulls out, if it's a white marble, the world gets better, and the world keeps getting better every time you pull out a white marble, but you pull that black marble out, the world ends.
No, I haven't
How
seen
many
that.
times do you reach into the bag? It's kind of a philosophical
Yeah.
discussion. Um, I don't necessarily have the same fears about AI that we're gonna suddenly reach a singularity and it's gonna not have any use for us. Um, if you spend any time with any of these models, you very quickly realize they don't have any motivation except for your motivation. So the fear is how people use the model, not what the model's going to do in and of itself.
Mhm.
There's you've heard of the paperclip doomsday,
You keep
where
bringing up things that I haven't heard of.
yeah, there's a standard, warning that, well, I'm gonna create an AI and it's gonna optimize for the most efficient paperclip production. And all of a sudden it takes over steel mills and everything, and we stop producing cars and planes and boats and hospitals just so it can concentrate on creating paper clips. These are I don't know, as having worked in tech for all these years, this seems so overblown and
Mhm.
sci-fi tech versus reality has never been even close. I mean, it's like, if you ever have a really Poindexter, tech geek guy and go to a movie with them that has any technology in it, they cannot stop talking about how bad or how wrong Hollywood got the technology. So I know it's sexy to talk about the AI fears and whatnot, and I don't think that I think we're it's kind of a misdirection. There are really legitimate things to worry about uses of AI. I do think we have to worry about government surveillance.
Mhm.
We have to worry about, and to a certain extent, we have to worry about big business surveillance, in as much as big businesses collaborate and work with the government as well. So
Well,
I'm very worried about that.
we
Um,
we 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 can worry about I agree that that's probably my biggest fear with AI is how the government's gonna use it and how these massive corporations are gonna use it to continue to take advantage of us. But I mean, is there really we can worry about it, but at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot we can do, as citizens. We can
uh,
vote as hard as we can to stop them.
well, I mean, I think we can make it very hard for government to get our information, and I think you're going to see kind of an arms race that's going to start very. It's kind of bubbling beneath the surface, like Proton Mail and that whole organization is kind of the start. The above phone and some of the other, privacy tools that are starting
The
to
above
come
phone,
out.
yeah. Sponsor of Alliance of Liberty, above phone. I need to start advertising that more.
Well, hey, I cut me on. I'm going to give them a plug. Um, but the idea is that I think you're going to start seeing tools that will hide you from business and government, and more importantly, from scammers. Because I don't think we take the use of AI by scammers seriously enough. I think it's crazy right now that we aren't, sounding the alarm that it is very easy to clone your voice. It's very easy to do a lot of things through AI and through existing programming tools. And the fact that we do a very bad job of encouraging digital hygiene, that people really should be addressing those kind of things. And if you're a small business, you really need to be paying attention to this because you have a lot of liability. um,
Mhm.
and as an individual, you know, you've got a lot on the line. I mean, most of us have, savings and retirement accounts and houses and cars and all kinds of things like that that we'd like to protect from scammers. And we're in a world where, it's not as, online scams used to be aimed at stupid people. That's
Yeah.
why there were misspellings and bad language and all of those errors. They were trying to filter out the people that would not be fooled by the scam. That's why they were so bad. If you had a reasonable head on your shoulders, you recognized it as a scam and didn't even fall into the trap. They wanted the dumb people because those were the people they could fleece. Now the tools are getting better and better. They're starting to climb up the tree to find more and more intelligent people with more and more assets to take advantage of. So, learning about digital hygiene and taking care of yourself. And like, for example, have you heard of OpenClaw?
Yeah.
It's an agent software.
Mhm.
Well, one of the first capabilities built into it that you could download to train your OpenClaw had a back door in it that would give access to your machine.
Jeez.
So, there's a lot of these new tools are going to come out, and some of them aren't going to use AI. They're going to use some tried and true old methods to attack you. So I don't think AI is unique. It gives a lot more capability, but I think it's a big danger that people should take their privacy and their digital security a lot more seriously.
Yeah. All right, couple more questions here. We got about 5 to 10 minutes left. So you work with small businesses, right? What do you think? If there's a small business owner out there listening, or one that someone who wants to become a small business owner, how should they be focusing, or how should they be utilizing AI, or looking to educate themselves on AI in order to benefit their business?
Um, how to educate? I'm a big believer in trying things. That's why we have our ChatGPT book. Is it really gets you up to speed if you've never done anything before? Um, you know, you got to get on board before you get up to speed, and that's a good
Mhm.
book to start there. I really encourage people to try it out. You know, don't be afraid. You can't really break anything. Um, the importance for small businesses. I think this is an opportunity that solopreneurs have been waiting for a long time. And the idea that back when they the first what was it, the 4 hour work week, that book came out.
Tim
Everybody
Ferriss,
was like,
yeah,
oh yeah.
great
And
book.
if you tried to actually implement some of that stuff, it was really hard.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was really hard to automate everything you were doing. And all of a sudden now with AI, we can actually do very professional, um, put in some very professional processes in place to make our small business look a lot bigger than it actually is. So, with voice agents, with some accounting software, so there's a lot of things that as a solopreneur, the idea that you can go into it with the idea that you're going to automate everything and you're going to be AI first when you start looking at developing your technology and try to find a mentor who knows what they're doing, you know, you're going to be miles ahead. Small businesses today are going to be in much better positions. Some of my favorite people to work with, I have an offer that I normally do. I call it, it's an hour where I interview a small business owner and I answer any of their questions. We walk through what their processes are, and I call it the most useful hour you're going to spend working on your business this year. And I love working with the guys when we find something during that hour who immediately start working on it and want
Mhm.
help with it within a day. That massive action right away, those are the people who are going to be successful. The people who say, I have a vision, there's something I want to accomplish, there's a service I want to put out into this world, and I'm not going to let anything get in my way. And all of a sudden, oh my God, I've got all these AI tools and I can apply those and use them and make this thing real. And I can do this immediately as fast as I possibly can. Those are the people who are going to win in the coming years.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten to a point, and people talk about what's going to be the first $1 billion single employee company. So I mean, it's going to happen eventually. I don't know if it's a year away, 2 years away, but it's something that I think we'll see here in the pretty near future. So probably last question here. Thinking about AI, some people I think maybe overhype it, right? So, what do you think is the most overrated AI claim that you've heard, or you know, um, a way that people are using AI where um, they're using it in a way that it's really not delivering the results that they say that are being delivered.
I think we tend to look at these tests that AI does, and it says, well, AI is now smart enough to replace your entry level paralegal, or it's smart as
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe, but in reality, no.
The AI can't get
Uh,
you coffee, so that's
well, no, I mean, it's I think the idea that we're looking at we got AI got blamed for a lack of entry level jobs, and there's this idea that we're not going to have entry level jobs because AI is going to be able to fill in for all of these people.
mhm.
And I think that that's way overhyped. I think what's going to happen is that new people entering fields are going to be expected to develop a lot faster, and AI is going to be required to make that happen. So you're not going to see like the entry level attorneys, entry level accountants disappear. What you're going to find out is at the size of our economy, we're going to need less accountants.
Oh, yeah.
But because we're not going to be paying a lot of money for accounting services, we're going to have more money to grow businesses. And what that's going to do is we're going to create more demand for more experienced accountants who can do more things. So it's going to work like what happened with bank tellers with ATMs. As soon as we rolled out ATMs, everybody thought, oh, we're going to run out of, we're not going to have any bank tellers. It's going to be a job that goes away. In reality, we suddenly needed more bank tellers because they were doing more things because the ATM was doing the easy stuff. Same thing with imaging. There was this idea that we weren't going to need radiologists. Well, all of a sudden, when we applied automation to radiology, the price dropped and the demand increased. So I think that this idea that we're going to replace experts with AI in the near term is just ridiculous. What's going to happen is we're going to need to level everybody up, and they're going to be responsible for doing a whole lot more.
Mhm. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, Marty, we're just about out of time here, but I want to give you a chance. I know along the way here you were plugging a couple products and ebooks. So I want to give you a chance now to tell people where they can get those, where they can learn more about you and follow you on social media if you want to share that.
Well, I'm a pretty boring follow on social media. I'm pretty dry and technical. I might, if you really want to, don't follow me on social media. Instead, I want you to go to my company was originally called Mountain State Digital LLC before I hooked up with WSI. So go to Mountain State Digital LLC.com, AI.mountainstatedigital.com, and it's going to take you to a landing page where you can download some free books about how AI is being used in small business. I think there's a free chat GPT book that will get you there. And if you download that one, you might get another free offer for a free prompt book. You're going to get on my mailing list if you do that. You don't have to stay on it. I don't, I'm plenty busy. So, if you want help, I'm glad to help you. But if you just want free books, I want to give away about 1,000 books this year. Only giving about a couple hundred. So, go get a free book. I don't care if you stay on the mailing list or not. If you do, there's a lot of good stuff that comes out every month.
You're a natural salesman there, telling people, "I don't even want you on my mailing list. I want you to get off my mailing list." And people
Uh, you
want
know,
on it when they hear that.
again, it's the I want people who are ready to take massive action. I love working with people who want to solve their problems. I hate people who are wishy washy about it.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, it's okay. Sit in the back, read the books, but when you really want to do something, come talk to me. I'd love to help you.
Yeah. Agree with that message, Marty. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with us today. We'll have to do this again in the future.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate you letting me rant.
All right. Anytime. All right, guys, that is a wrap for today's show. As always, if you like this show, if you like what we do on Lines of Liberty, please consider joining us. Please consider becoming a patron or a Paula Prick, as we say now. You can find us on Patreon or on Locals just by searching Lions of Liberty, and you get some bonus content and some other fun goodies along the way. Also, whatever you're listening or watching on, please do make sure you're subscribed. Give us a nice 5-star rating and leave a nice review. If you're going to leave a bad review, then just skip that part. But if you've listened this long, hopefully the review would not be bad. But anyway, I will see you all in another week with another great interview. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.